Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about FANG developers. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, many FANG developers have told me that most developers working at non-FANG companies are incompetent and often blame the system instead of upskilling themselves. Why do you think that FANG developers look down and dislike non-FANG developers? Well, first and foremost, I would like to question whether or not it is accurate to say that FANG developers, just in general, to sort of draw and push over everybody and sort of generalize them into one bucket, because I do know FANG developers, they're friends of mine, and they were FANG developers. Then I worked with them and they kept on being the same people, basically, as far as I know, and then they went back in some cases or they stayed with us and so forth. I worked with many people who have worked for one of the FANG companies over the years now. And I've never heard that they look down upon non-FANG developers. I suppose that is a culture thing, and to some degree, of course, but it's also primarily most likely the thing that happens for anybody who feel that they are more in line with what is the coolest or the best or so forth and so forth. And I would also question that whether or not this is true only for FANG companies and non-FANG companies, or it's just a general truth. What I mean by that is basically that, do you think that the FANG companies, like all of their systems are always working and everything is just perfect? I find that highly unlikely, considering that they have just as any company, the FANG companies have systems that, well, don't do so well. Products that may go out of commission or products that have bugs or things like that. It's sort of weird if you think about it, that just because you're in a FANG company, therefore your systems are always working. But the sentiment that is being raised here is basically the idea that a lot of developers are incompetent, and in this case outside of the FANG companies, and that instead that they blame the system instead of upskilling themselves. And that's the thing that I would like to touch on the most. So to give you a really short description of the core reason, it might be that you experience that some FANG developers are saying this, and well, me personally I find that it's not just FANG developers who say this. There's quite a lot of developers who say these exact things. Is that you have worse friends than me, and that is true for everywhere, guys. Like it's the same thing you'll see with, for example, I talk to quite a lot of software developers who have a university education. So what they tell me is they ask me questions such as, why is it that I have to work with self-taught developers because they're so bad, for example. I have C++ developers who look down, who say that, yeah, no, JavaScript is just bullshit, right? Like, it's always messy, it never works, and so forth, and all the developers who are doing it is basically incompetent. So what I'm trying to say here is basically that if you consider yourself to be the thing that is desirable, like the popular kids or the sports kids or the rich or whatever is socially higher value in any given context, you will, like, regardless of what it is, you will always find a few people who let that sink in, become part of their identity, and therefore they will now project their value system onto others and say that, oh, you are not this thing, therefore you are bad. So either you're like me or you're bad. And incidentally, that labeling system and that sensation of identity and prestige and so forth, I would go as far as to say that I argue that that's why certain in-between people, that's where the extremes are coming from, you don't get accepted, because the person who's doing this, the way that they are thinking is that what I am, I've worked very hard for, I deserve it, or I feel entitled to. But if you don't fit the mold that I have created, that sort of is my box, the thing that I use as a measurement tool to say whether or not other people are good. If you don't fit that mold according to my definition, then therefore you are bad. It's if we talk about race, for example, if you have if you have a mixed raced child, you might find that depending on your community, you might not be accepted. You'd think that you're a little bit you're a mix of two cultures or two ethnicities, right? Therefore, you should be accepted by everybody. But that's not always the case. Same thing if you're like religious or if you're doing some type of sport or something like that. Either you are everything, you sign up for everything that I believe to be the thing that makes you valuable as the person who is the quote unquote the right race or the right religion or the right social status or whatever it might be. Either you fulfill all my requirements or you are bad. And those people are everywhere, guys. Everything, all over the place. It doesn't matter if it's a FANG company or whatever, right? But if we draw it back to what I believe is going on here, which I think is true, is that it is definitely true, based on my experience at the very least, that quite a lot of software developers blame the system for the state of the system. So most of the time I find that software developers very often complain about the state of their system. Yet whenever I ask, how did it get to that place? I always get almost always get the same answer. Well, we have legacy, we have tech debt, and we have this and that and so forth. And I go, why don't you fix it? Because we're not allowed time, we're not allowed this, it can't be done, etc., etc. And I go, well, who wrote the system? You wrote the system. Who else is going to fix it? And when we really get down to it, what most developers are doing is that they are complaining about their situation without having any desire whatsoever to try to fix it. And I keep on finding over and over that when for example, I say I have that as a job these days actually. So I talk to a bunch of software developers and the managers are unhappy and they are unhappy because the system is shit and so forth. All I have to do is to sit down and say, alright, let's add some code coverage. Let's start with a simple thing, because there are no unit tests, for example. Let's make sure that there is a rule for unit testing. Okay, we'll add that as a rule. And it never fails. Within the same, from the point I do that, and I give some feedback in code reviews or so forth and so forth, that we should add some tests or so forth and so forth, then things are taking a little bit longer, and now they start complaining, because now they can't meet their deadlines. And so they complain over the fact that now they have to do something else that they don't want to do. Yet it is the thing that they need to do in order to not have a shitty system. And so yes, I think I can sort of resonate with the idea that quite a lot of software developers are incompetent and unwilling to, like as I said, like that they are happy to complain about their situation, yet like any motivation to actually fix those issues, or in many cases, which is the reason why I join a lot of companies or a lot of teams these days as a temporary tech lead or things like that, is that, well, they don't know how to fix it. And so when I try to introduce a fix, usually you have one or two camps. Either they're open to changing their work practices and educate themselves a little bit in order to make that happen, and then, as I like to say, you have the seniors. Like the mid-levels and the juniors are usually open to these sorts of things. The seniors are not much, they're a little bit more difficult. And so they start complaining and going behind my back to managers and saying that Frederick is incompetent, he's forcing us to do all this stuff and I don't want to do that, wah. And then I tell my manager and I say, well, when I started they complained about the state of the system. And now they're complaining about the fact that I'm asking them to do something about it. And to me, as I said, like I can be everybody's friend and just say everybody's perfect, and then we can go back to complaining about that the system is shit or that everything is always broken and so forth. But to me, it's a little bit like a fat person telling me that I'm so unhappy because I'm fat, and then I say, okay, cool, let's work on that together. Let's start exercising. And now they are not complaining about being fat. They complain about the fact that they have to go for a walk or go to the gym. So I put the ball to them and I say, which problem do you want? Do you want developers who complain about the fact that they have to do things that's good for the system? Or do you want developers who complain about a shitty system? And I always find the same thing. If they don't adjust, fire them. Because you can't change this. fundamentally. Like some people, as I said, they are happy to sit and complain about everything, yet completely unwilling to do anything about it that requires effort on their part. So what I want you to take away from this is that I don't really feel that it's completely fair to say that all FANG developers look down on other like outside of FANG companies. I know for a fact that it happens, and I think that that has to do not so necessarily much with that all FANG developers behave that way, or everybody who works for a prestigious organization thinks that way. It's a branch of people, or a group of people who, as I said, for them it's extremely important to feel superior to other people. And so the closer they are to the ideal, well, they're going to label everybody else as not close enough to that ideal. The more extreme you are, the better, right? And that is not true just for FANG companies and IT. That's true for like everything that you can imagine. Take any topic which people can nerd out about to feel superior about, and they will feel superior about it. I promise you. I mean, shit, I've heard about people who feel superior because they have the right postal code or live in the right city, or like it doesn't matter what it is. And I do agree with that quite a lot of software developers are incompetent. At the very least when it comes to fixing these sorts of issues that, well, as I like to say, if it's not your fault that the system has a bunch of legacy, whose fault is it? Because you wrote the code. Like I can't break it down further than that. And you can absolutely make up like excuses like, oh, the specifications were unclear, or like this was wrong, we never get enough time, and things like that. And I go, okay, have you tried to figure these things out? Like, what are you doing to fix those issues? And everybody sort of just shrugs and say, well, yeah, basically never. And that's why they usually ask me to do it instead. And then, as I said, the second I start doing it, you start figuring out if they actually just want to complain, or if they're actually willing to do something about it. And I find more often than not that it's a 50-50 split, or like something similar to that. Quite a lot of developers don't give two shits about upskilling or improving themselves, or trying to actually do things to improve their situation. Most of them are just there, just want to complain, and will even complain more if you try to make them improve in any meaningful way. Have a great day.